I will be recording this session and it will be available after the series for you to look over again in case you have any questions, and I will make that available to you. If you send me an email, I will put my email in the chat box, and you can always reach out to me with any questions or to request the video. There will be a quick survey at the end that I will put in the chat, and I would appreciate if you could respond to that. And now we can get started. So thank you again for joining us. My name is Sabrina. I'm the project coordinator at KCR, working on the Refugee Response Team. And today I have with me Bekircan Tahberer, who is a certified translator and professional interpreter. And I'd like to quickly acknowledge that I am on the unceded and traditional territory of the Syilx people, and offer a funding acknowledgement to the Ministry of Municipal Affairs, without whom this series of translation and interpretation workshops would not be possible. So I will turn it over to Bekircan. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sabrina, for this nice introduction, and welcome everyone. To tell you the truth, I like in-person presentations and workshops, and I like the interaction. And I only see that we have 3 participants at the moment. Feel free to chime in, and if you have any questions, just unmute yourself and ask your questions during the presentation. I usually recommend that you put your questions in the chat box, and then I go back and answer them. But now that we don't have so many people, you're most welcome to ask your questions during the presentation if you do have any questions though. Now, as you see, I introduce myself or present myself as a certified translator and a professional interpreter. I achieved certification in translation, and I was not able to take the certification exam in interpretation because there was no exam when I first got certified, and there's still no exam in my language. But the exams are available in so many different languages, which I will be talking about it shortly. That's why I present myself as a certified translator and a professional interpreter. And in Canada, certified translation and interpretation are protected titles, and no one else but certified translators and certified interpreters may introduce themselves as certified. So I just wanted to emphasize that. Now, best practices for professional interpreters is a topic that I discovered worth offering a presentation about 15 years ago, because when I was the manager of the Society of Translators and Interpreters, I noticed that many members, mostly newcomers, joined the society and they wanted to work as interpreters, yet they didn't have the background knowledge. Even though they had the language skills, they didn't have the background knowledge about professional interpretation. So I thought we should put this together as a training session for the society members. And then I noticed that the need is actually larger than what we would have at the society. So I started to offer this to other institutions. So as part of that initiative, I'm offering this to the Kelowna Community Resources. Okay, so let's start with the presentation. What is interpreting? There are thousands of different definitions, but I like this one best among them. Faithful, complete, and neutral transfer of oral messages from one language into another. We have so many different areas that we provide our services: court interpreting, conference interpreting, healthcare interpreting, business interpreting, interpreting in disaster situations, interpreting in conflict zones, refugee interpreting. As a matter of fact, they are all combined under one title: community interpreting. And from community interpreting, we get areas of specializations. Mostly the most specialized ones are court interpreting, conference interpreting, healthcare interpreting. And there is certification in these areas. There is no structure for business, disaster situations, refugee interpreting, or conflict zones interpreting, but they are equally important and delicate, to say the least, when it comes to gaining expertise and providing professional services. Court interpreting is very challenging. Unless you have training in that field, it is something that you have to keep away from. Conference interpreting is a brain boiler. You have to have experience and training, not to mention the linguistic perfection. And it is, certification is gained in each direction separately. So you can only be certified from one language into another first, and then you can try the other one. Most people will interpret from a foreign language into their mother tongue because it's a very, very challenging area. Healthcare interpretation is not much different from court interpretation. You have to have knowledge in the healthcare system, terminology, and the code of ethics in healthcare interpreting. Business interpreting, again, it sounds something simple, but it has its own challenges. I'll talk about it later. And interpreting in disaster situations, you are most prone to making mistakes in situations like that, because you are in a disaster area, and everyone is in panic. Everyone is running, rushing. So it's extremely challenging to work in a work setting like that. Conflict zones, I would never be in a situation where I would have to provide my services. Literally, we are talking about war zones. Even if it is in non-combatant times, you're putting your life in danger. You're becoming an enemy while trying to provide your services to one party, and you're becoming an enemy for the other party. And refugee interpreting has its own challenges. As you see, in each area, you have to have training, education, and experience before you provide your services. Knowing 2 languages is never enough. It is the beginning, it is the first step, but it is never enough to take on an assignment in any of these areas without at least contemplating. Maybe, in a disaster situation, you will not get ready for it. This disaster strikes and you have to go and do your job, but you have to have a mindset. You have to prepare yourself in terms of terminology, human rights, respect to different cultures, and guessing what might come after each situation, so that you prepare yourself for the occasion. So therefore, these different areas are equally important to learn about, gain experience, and perform judiciously all the time. Now, this question was really crucial about 10 years ago. Why should you consider certification in court, community, and medical interpretation? When I first came to Canada in 2005, I had about 30 years of experience under my belt. And I had interpreted in so many different areas. I had translated literally thousands of pages of documents. I was 200% ready. And I talked to this person, to that person, and they all smiled. They all say, oh, welcome to Canada. Oh, we need good language professionals, this and that. Nobody gives me any jobs. Nobody cares about me, even though, you know, I had my diplomas and certificates that I brought from my country. I'm originally from Turkey, by the way. I pronounce the name Turkey, as some of you might know. The country officially applied to the United Nations to change its spelling. It's no longer Turkey, but it's now Turkey. So I pronounce it that way. Anyways, even though I brought all my accreditations from Turkey, they were not accepted. So I literally saw the need to get accredited. And that's why when I joined the Society of Translators and Interpreters, this became crystal clear. Because certification creates a new class of qualified and certified language professions. To get accepted in Canada as a language professional or in any other profession, you need to get accredited here. It is really difficult to get your home country accreditation recognized in Canada. So the sooner you accept this idea and the fact, and the sooner you take steps towards getting accredited here, the faster you're going to improve and progress in your life in Canada. Here is the website for the society. So to get certified, you need to join a professional society in Canada. In British Columbia, we have the Society of Translators and Interpreters. I'm not trying to promote the society. I'm not asking you to join the society. I'm just telling you that the first step to get accredited in Canada as a translator and or interpreter, you need to be a member of one of the professional societies across Canada. There are 7 of them. In BC, we have the Society of Translators and Interpreters of British Columbia. It's not a bad thing to join the society. In fact, I must admit, the best professional step I have ever done after coming to Canada. At the moment, I work as a freelance translator and interpreter and translation interpretation instructor. And I make my living thanks to my certification and accreditation. So joining the Society of Translators and Interpreters is a good start for a career in translation and interpretation because you get accredited. Here are the specific web pages on the Society's website on how to become an associate member, the admission policy, and the application process. I'm not going to talk about this in this presentation because we have another one coming up, the path to certification and accreditation and certification. It will be the next one after this one. So we'll be talking about that then. But these are just some hints for you to look into when you have a few minutes. Okay. Okay. So institutionalizing the community and medical interpreting in Canada was an issue about 6-7 years ago. We had some websites promoting their services to certified people. And we immediately contacted these people and we told them that in Ontario, in Alberta, and in British Columbia, we have title protection and that They may not certify people, and only the provincial organizations that hold title protection may do so. So the work started in 2012. In 2013, some crucial decisions were made. And finally, in 2017, we started to offer the certification exam in community and medical interpreting. We already had an exam in court interpretation. There used to be an exam in conference interpretation, but the exam was not updated. So I don't know if it is still offered. I believe it is not offered at the moment, but certification on dossier is another option, and that is available. We will talk about that later again. Anyways, we had to act quickly, as Klaus Schwab of the World Economic Forum said. In the new world, it is not the big fish which eats the small fish. It is the fast fish which eats the slow fish. So you have to act as quickly as possible. Don't waste time. If you want to pursue a career in this field, do your best, because these are the protected titles. You will never be introduce yourself as certified unless you go through the certification process of the Society of Translators and Interpreters. So certified translator, certified conference interpreter, certified terminologist, certified court interpreter, certified medical interpreter, certified community interpreter are the protected titles in British Columbia. And guess what? Once you earn this certification, your language skills are recognized, accepted by almost all government agencies and private entities. So everybody is trying to work with certified translators and interpreters. And unfortunately, the Society Act changed. After December 15, 2015, the Society Act does not allow any more title protection. So we did the right thing at the right time. Interpreting, I'm a historian at the same time. I like to look into the history of things. And interpreting, I discovered, is a very ancient profession. Here is a frieze from ancient Egypt, from the tomb of Horemheb at Saqqara. Saqqara is a region in Egypt, in ancient Memphis, from the 2nd millennium BCE. The frieze itself is in Holland right now, showing two interpreters, like conference interpreters. Look at this. This one is interpreting to the party here. This one is interpreting to the party here. So the professional standards were set actually thousands of years ago. That's really curious to see here. While we are talking about certification, we need to emphasize certain things, why we need language professionals. Some of you will remember this from December 2013, during Nelson Mandela's memorial service, when the US president was giving a talk, there appeared a fake sign language interpreter. And all along the speech, he performed his gibberish. And it was only discovered, of course, it was noticed by sign language, professional sign language interpreters, but of course it was too late, and there was no way to stop this person. So people, pretentious people do appear in certain situations and provide interpretation. And in most cases, it results in a disaster. Sometimes a small disaster, sometimes a big disaster. Now, I have a short movie clip that I would like to share with you. Unfortunately, it doesn't, the sound doesn't work. on the presentation, so I will briefly stop sharing this one, and I'll share a YouTube page with you, and we will watch that together. And let me see. By the way, can you hear the sound? Can you tell me if you hear the sound?
No,
No?
I don't hear. No, the sound is not coming through.
That's really annoying. Okay. Okay, just a moment. Okay, one more time, if you could please tell me. Can you hear it now?
It's also like, yeah, it's not clear again.
I can't hear.
Okay.
I can't hear at all.
You can?
No, I can't hear at all.
You can't. Okay. Well, my apologies. Then I'll go back and I'll go back to the presentation, but I will encourage you. I'll just explain to you what's going on here. So this is from the Desert Flower movie, based on real events. And I would encourage you to watch the complete movie, but this clip is available. I have the YouTube link below here. After the presentation, I would encourage you to go and watch it if possible. So it's a hospital setting, and the doctor diagnoses the problem and offers a solution. And he uses a nurse from the same country to interpret, but the nurse doesn't interpret what the doctor says, and instead he shames the patient for being there and shaming his culture and her culture and her religion. So this is a real word, and this is not an isolated incident, but it is something that happens quite often when we don't use professional translation and interpretation services. So I just wanted to make a point here by showing this rather not so pleasant movie clip, but we have to keep this in mind, and if necessary, talk about it with other people when they use unprofessional interpretation services. So in general, translators and interpreters can save lives. We have to understand that. We have to promote that to other people so that they must not think that everyone who speaks two languages can provide language services. This is a striking piece of news that I like to share with people during my presentation. Some people disagree, and some people say it was not that simple, but I believe it is important to make a point, and I call it the world's most tragic translation mistake. Mokusatsu, that was uttered on July 28th, 1945, when the translation, as you know, you're all language professionals, a word can mean several things, depending on the occasion, depending on the situation. We know the difference as language professionals. We will interpret it accordingly. In this case, it's a Japanese word, and it means to ignore or to refrain from comments at the moment, or withhold comment. So based on the context, mokusatsu could mean three different things, and they can, and the differences between each can be crucial. Without knowing the differences, if you translate it, say ignore, this is what happened. everybody knows about the atomic bomb attack of the US against two Japanese cities, Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So once the Allied forces defeated the German army, they demanded that Japan also surrender at the end of the World War II. And the Japanese Prime Minister allegedly said mokusatsu, or used that word in his statement when he was asked if Japan would surrender. Maybe he meant I refrain from comments at the moment, or maybe he meant I'm withholding comment at the moment, but it was translated as I'm ignoring, or we are ignoring, or the Japanese government is ignoring this ultimatum. And using that as a pretext for the attack, the world experienced this incredible disaster. So this is how much it is important to provide professional services when it comes to languages. Now that, oh yeah, a little bit of the disaster emergency refugee seeking. Again, in these situations, people usually grab anyone by the arms, anyone who speaks two languages by the arms and ask for help. And unfortunately, these are not the situations that we can control the quality of interpretation. One of the areas where people use children as interpreter, and I'm 100% against that. It is extremely dangerous to use children as interpreters because as well as their language skills may be, they're very prone to make mistakes. The same is true for family members as an interpreter. We must not allow any of these to happen. And you use tribesmen as an interpreter, as it happened in war zones. You simply ruin the lives of those people. And unfortunately, authorities, governments, agencies, institutions are not knowledgeable about any of these delicate situations. I don't know how many hours I spent talking to government agencies and private institutions during my time at the Society of Interpreters, and how disappointing it was. I discovered that how little knowledge they have about these issues. So as language professionals, we need to promote professional interpretation all the time. Professionalization of community and medical interpreting became an issue for ISO as well. They created some guidelines for community interpreting. It's not different from what we already know, but it's actually international and it's worldwide accepted. So 8 ethical principles: accuracy and fidelity. So you're going to interpret accurately and being loyal to the source language. Confidentiality, of course, it's inseparable. Impartiality, respect for persons, maintaining role boundaries, accountability, professionalism, and continued competence. So you need to continue to improve your language skills all the time. Again, we have 7 associations across Canada. We have very few actually certified people. In court interpretation, approximately 120 people are certified. In community and medical interpretation, we have around 60 people certified so far. 50 of them by exam and 10 of them by on the CA process. The conference interpretation has the least or the fewest number of interpreters, maybe 6, 7 of them. You can say, is that enough? No, of course. Do people use uncertified interpreters here and there? Yes, they do. But to gain recognition, certification is very important. That's all I can say. If you're not familiar with the provincial and federal law systems, criminal law, civil law, I would say stay away from interpreting in court settings. In a small town like Kelowna, people sometimes need interpretation in certain delicate situations. Don't just jump on it to make a few bucks, or out of compassion to help out to the community. If you are not familiar with the Canadian law system, do not provide your services. You can do more damage than good to the parties. Community versus court interpreters, the way the work settings. In community interpreting, you will be mostly interpreting consecutively. You can easily take notes. You might be asked to do some side translation. You need to be aware of community structure. You have to be sensitive to cultural differences, and you have to know about the code of ethics for community interpreters. And at the same time, the work settings are, you usually freelance independently. You work with settlement agencies, education system, government institutions, and sometimes police forces, which is actually an area for mostly court interpreters. Medical interpreters, you have to have competencies in consecutive interpreting, side translation, note taking, knowledge of medical terminology. You need to be familiar with the Canadian health system and terminology. Awareness of general medical procedures is a must. You have to be, of course, sensitive to cultural differences, just like the movie that we watched. And medical interpreter code of ethics will be your guide to provide services in an ethical manner. Work settings, again, you will be working as a freelancer independently, and healthcare settings, hospital, clinics, doctors' offices, rehabilitation centers, nursing homes, mental illness facilities, substance abuse clinics. I provided my services in mental illness facilities, in all those settings, but I found mental illness facilities and substance abuse clinics are the most challenging one. The language sometimes is not easy, but mental preparedness, I discovered, is key to provide successful services. So interpreting methods, you will sometimes hear these professional abbreviations, OSI, they sometimes say, I don't like these, but people sometimes, pretentious people like to use them, but you should know about them. OSI, so on-site interpreting, VRI, video remote interpreting, OPI, over the phone interpreting. They're just trying to impress you. I simply don't like these abbreviations, but it's out there. So interpreting methods, consecutive interpreting, simultaneous interpreting, side translation, face-to-face, telephone, video remote interpreting. Consecutive interpreting means the client speaks and you wait until that person completes his or her sentence, and you start interpreting right after. Simultaneous interpreting, as the word simultaneous denotes, you do it at the same time, while the client or the other party, the judge, the prosecutor, the administrator speaks, you interpret at the same time. Site translation is usually a document that is produced on the site, and they ask you to read and site translate that to the clients. So you read without writing, you verbally translate a document or what is written on a document. And face-to-face, telephone, video, remote interpreting are the options for providing our services. The pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic taught us a lot of things. Zoom was one of the pioneers of the online service providers, and then Microsoft Teams, GoToMeeting, Google Hangouts, and many others came after that. As an interpreter, unfortunately, they don't give us the option to choose any of these or any one of these. They usually do their preparations, and they give us the link, and we have to use the software that they choose. I find Zoom very easy to use. Microsoft Teams is a little bit challenging at times. GoToMeeting is not user-friendly all the time. Google Hangouts works perfectly in certain situations, and then I had some difficulties in other settings. No matter what, as a language professional, we have to become familiar with all of these. And if you're not familiar, just do your due diligence and learn about it before the assignment starts, and make sure that you look presentable and ready, but not unready and unprofessional by trying to click here and there, and just like me trying to work the video clip. It's not professional. I don't like it. I want to show my audience that I am in perfect control of everything, and failing in one item is not acceptable in our field. So my apologies again. Anyways, going back to the interpreting methods, you have to have a good computer. I don't think cell phones are appropriate to provide good services. So make sure that when you take an assignment on Zoom or Microsoft Teams or any others, make sure that you are in front of your computer, and your computer is well equipped with the internet and everything. Oh, I was going to explain something. So the online interpretation, video remote interpretation, has changed a few things, especially in court settings or in settings where the session is recorded. It's not appropriate to provide simultaneous interpreting, because then the sound becomes garbled, and what is recorded is impossible to use. And many institutions and administrators might not know about that. I was interpreting in a mental clinic setting, and they asked me to interpret simultaneously. And of course, if that is what they ask, then I will do it the way they want it. However, 2 or 3 minutes into the session, they stopped me and they asked me to switch to consecutive interpreting. So I didn't offer to I didn't offer my opinion. I just wanted them to discover it themselves, because had I offered that we should do consecutive interpreting, they might have thought that I was not able to interpret simultaneously. So I didn't want them to think that way. I wanted them to experience it directly to see what is working, what is not working. Anyways, they discovered that consecutive interpreting is the best option when we do video remote interpreting or telephone interpreting. Face-to-face interpretation without any requirement to record the session, simultaneous works. In court settings, simultaneous does work, but in video remote interpreting, even in court, it doesn't work because the sound of each person has to be recorded separately, and it has to be audible and intelligible. So you need to know about these delicate situations when you provide your services. When I do online interpretation, I usually have my screen shared with a dictionary, an online dictionary next to the setting. This is an interpretation session for a committee. As you see, I have 6 people with myself, 7, and I have on the right-hand side my dictionary. I hardly use a dictionary, but now that I am in front of my own computer in my privacy, I put it here in case I need it. And this was a delicate subject, and they used a lot of specialized words 2 or 3 times. I interpreted for them a couple times before, so I was familiar with most of the terminology, but in 1 or 2 sessions, I needed to go to the dictionary and find out the meaning of some words. So this is how I have my setting when I do online interpretation. I say interpreters are just like orchestra conductors. Even though we are not there to manage anything, we have to act like a ghost manager, just like an orchestra conductor. Interpreting between 2 people or 5 or more people will be different. 2 people, you can briefly explain how you're going to work with them, and they will follow up. Working with 5 or more people, it becomes really challenging. Again, you have to emphasize how you're going to work with them and train them. When I say train, you're not going to train them for 2 days. You're going to do that in 2 or 3 minutes. You just need to emphasize how important it is to work with you, the way you can provide efficient services. And we need to make sure that they understood what we said. And interpretation, this is a very good cartoon to explain what interpretation is. You must understand both the vocabulary and the idea behind the message before beginning to interpret. And just like the Hiroshima Nagasaki slide, it is very important that we understand what is said so that we can provide an accurate and complete interpretation in the other language. So again, code of conduct in different fields. Are you familiar with the court, community, and medical interpreters code of professional conduct? Number 1, faithful and accurate interpretation, primarily in terms of meaning, secondarily in terms of style. We're not going to embellish, we're not going to add anything, we're not going to omit anything. No explanation or expression of opinion during interpretation. Remaining impartial and avoiding any appearance of bias or favoritism to any person. Every item is singularly important, and we can talk about each item for hours. Remaining impartial and avoiding any appearance of bias or favoritism to any person. It can be a person in a political discussion. A refugee say that you favor politically in your private life, but you cannot favor that person in a setting like that. So you have to be impartial no matter what, and you must not show any bias towards that person. The opposite is also true. They can represent a political party that you hate, but it's not a place for your hatred. It is a place that you have to provide your services impartially and avoid any bias in a situation like that. Avoiding any real or apparent conflict of interest and informing the administrator or the interpreter scheduler of any possible conflicts of interest. Even if you have provided translation services to that person 2 years ago, it might be an issue of conflict of interest. I was asked to interpret for a client in a court setting, and I had provided translation services to that client, and I had to let the judge know about that, and the judge said it was okay. And luckily, during the court hearing, they used one of my translations as evidence, and there was a misunderstanding by the defendant, and it was great that I was there to explain the translation, the issue that the defendant brought up. If I were not there, the court would have stopped and questioned my translation maybe, or they would have contacted me to make an explanation, provide an explanation. So it's really important that we are aware of this conflict of interest issue. And no advice or opinion giving to witnesses or other parties, no explanation of proceedings. So you're interpreting, the party doesn't understand. You're not there to explain. You're just an interpreter, just interpret, and they should say, I don't understand. And then you interpret that, and the other party should provide more information, or rephrase his or her statement so that you can provide that interpretation. Keeping all assignments related information confidential, even when that information is not privileged information or required by law to be kept confidential. Now, information of your clients are confidential, but between you and the client, it is privileged information. It's not just confidential. Confidential is, of course, strong enough to explain the delicacy of the situation. However, privileged goes beyond confidential. That information is specific to that person, and it is considered privileged more than confidential. As well as confidential, it is privileged information. You have to keep that in mind all the time. And you're not going to discuss any aspect of the case with parties, witnesses, or any other person. So this is maybe the worst part of it. We interpret, we simply go into people's private lives. Whether it is in a healthcare situation or a court situation or a community interpreting situation. No matter what the situation is, we go into people's lives. And we like to, and a lot of things accumulate in our mind. And we have the urge interpreters will know this very well. Then we will have to have the urge to release, to empty what has accumulated in our mind from that session. I usually take a walk out in the cold or sun or whatever the weather condition is. About 30 minutes of walk usually helps me release that tension built up in my mind. There are other options in certain communities, translation, interpretation agencies. They have stuff that you can go and talk without divulging any confidential and privileged information. You can just talk. I had a very difficult session today, and I feel extremely stressed. I'm just talking. I'm not asking you for any help. I'm not trying to seek a solution to how I feel. I'm just talking. And that is enough, actually. And the other party doesn't need to say anything. They will just sit and listen to you. You only have a person listening to you, and that is enough. However, no matter what, you will not be divulging any details, personal information, let alone confidential and privileged information about the session that you attended. Immediately inform the administrator anytime during an assignment if you feel you're unable to provide proper interpretation. We are human. We can become unable to provide services. That happens, and it's a medical situation. Even if it is a mental situation, it is a medical situation, and we have to be 100% efficient and competent and healthy to provide 100% accurate and complete service. So when you feel that you're unable to do that, let the other parties know and stop or ask for a break. Appearing on time for all assignments, of course, I cannot emphasize this enough. You have to be very, very careful about that. If you're unable to attend on time, just give interpreter scheduler advance notice. Let them know that you're not able to come, so that ahead of time, of course, so that they can find another interpreter. Do not assign or attempt to assign work to another interpreter yourself. It's very dangerous. Do not call a colleague and say, hey, I have this assignment, but I'm not able to attend it. Why don't you go? Don't do that. You're still responsible for that referral. It's not worth the risk. If you are hired by an administrator and or an individual, you still adhere to the same code of conduct. So you may be freelancing, maybe somebody hired you to interpret. You're not working for that person. This is a very, very important distinction. Please pay attention to that. We do not work for people. We work with people, whether it is an institution or an individual. We do not work for them. They might hire us, they might pay us, but we are not their employees. When we perform as an interpreter, we work with them. I only work for myself. Nobody is my boss, so nobody can dictate me. Nobody can ask me to favor them. I will only work for myself. I will only dictate to myself, and no one else will do that. So you have to keep that distinction in mind all the time, and you still have to comply with the same code of conduct. What is it? Impartiality. It will never change. Unbiased service. It will never change. You pay me, you're not buying me. You pay for my services, and I provide professional language services to you. Something really pleasant happened recently. I was hired to interpret for a person in court. It was a family law matter, and I provided my services, and in court setting, when you are hired privately, it is well known that you will not be allowed to interpret for the opposing party. But the opposing party and their lawyer ask me and the other party if they would allow me to interpret for the other part, for the opposing party too. And I said yes. You know, it would be nice for me to provide my services if only the judge agrees to my interpreting to both parties. And they talked to the judge, and the judge also said that she observed my services during my interpretation session, and she allowed me to interpret for the both parties. So it's a very, very rare situation, but if you do a good job, it happens. I'm not trying to say I'm the best interpreter on anything. All I'm trying to emphasize is that you adhere to the code of conduct of professional interpretation, courts or private institutions. People will hire you. People will want to work with you. So I had this pleasant experience. I hope I will have more of those. After all, you know, the income is important. We have. So report to the interpreter scheduler at the conclusion of each assignment for any further instructions, including assisting with further negotiations or meetings, etc. So the interpretation session came to an end. Don't just take off. Wait for a few minutes, and even if it is online, I'm usually one of the last to leave the session. I just wait for, you know, quietly wait for the other parties to complete their wrapping up conversation and see if they have anything to ask me. And at the end, I will simply say, is there anything that the interpreter is required to do? I'm you know, more than happy to provide more services if you need my help. And when they say, no, we don't need you anymore, I say goodbye. But just don't take off immediately after the session. Always remember that you are accountable for complying with directions from administration and abide by their code of professional conduct. Try to find out details of the code of conduct of the institution you provide interpretation services. They're not going to be much different. The basic ethics rules will apply to many, many institutions. However, it's always good to do some research once you accept an assignment for an institution. Do your due diligence, go around online. We find a lot of information. Try to find out if there is anything that you should know that you would otherwise not know when you go to that assignment. Dress and conduct yourself in a manner consistent with the dignity of a professional and the institution you work with. Jeans, yeah, you know, people do wear them. I saw lawyers wear jeans, though I disagree with them. And you don't have to have a tie or suit all the time. And for ladies, of course, you don't have to have the most fancy professional costumes, but you have to dress up appropriately. And you have to distinguish yourself as a professional, not just an interpreter, but as a professional. I saw an interpreter with in his slippers, for instance, in a courtroom. maybe it was an emergency situation. Maybe they grabbed him quickly from his home, and he didn't have time to take his shoes along. But again, it's not nice. And then there are situations where you have to dress up properly. So this is an assignment that I took a couple of years ago. I was interpreting for this power line company, and so I literally didn't expect to be in a setting like this, and I had to borrow warm jackets and toque and gloves. So I was certainly not dressed up for the occasion. And also in a setting like this, in a helicopter, even the seating was limited, as you see, and I was facing back. I always position myself in the middle because I'm interpreting for all of those people, and I would have loved to sat next to the window and watch the view from the window, but that was not my setting to enjoy the view. My role was to interpret, and I had to position myself in such way. Nobody notices that. Nobody asked me to do that, but I intentionally observe the setting and place myself in a position that I can provide my services 100% professionally. Note-taking techniques, you can develop one for yourselves. There are many different suggestions. This is how I do. I usually use a good pen, easy to write, or a pencil if I'm at home. And this is what I do when I do interpretation. In an outside setting, I usually don't take notes. My memory is still good. And the moment that I feel that my memory is not 100% up to the task, I will stop interpreting. So interpreters may take notes. And as I said, I do take notes when I'm at home. It's easy. But in a setting outside my home, I make sure that I remember everything and I don't skip or omit anything. Again, nobody else will know about your competency or your memory competency. You have to make sure that your memory competency is there to provide 100% accurate interpretation services. So I have some guidelines here. Some of them will be repetitions, but they're worth to go over. Before going to an assignment, if possible, try to find out the subject matter of the situation, case, and disaster. Just ask questions when they call you to book you. Prepare any special terminology you may need. Even on the way to the assignment location, in my mind, I have my terminology running. If it is online, again, 30 minutes before before that assignment, I'm always in front of my computer. I make sure that 30 minutes is my time to mentally prepare for the assignment. Ask to meet with the administrator and the person for whom you will be interpreting a few minutes before the session begins to brief them on how to work with an interpreter. This is 100% important to do. It's the little training that I was talking about. Explain to them your role as an interpreter. Explain your system of controlling the length of speech that you can interpret accurately, and familiarize yourself with the person's speech pattern. And finally, remind the parties that you will interpret everything they say. So many people don't know how to work with an interpreter. How can they know? Maybe that will be the first time they'll be working with an interpreter. There are the times that they speak and they ask me not to interpret. And I even interpret what they said the last, not to interpret. So, that's why it is very important that you emphasize strongly at the beginning that you will interpret everything that they say. And if they have anything that they don't want to say, that they should not say it in the first place. If a word is uttered, I will interpret that. And so that they cannot blame you in the end for interpreting what they didn't want you to interpret. More guidelines at the time of interpretation assignment: be well-groomed, dressed in normal business attire. I say be well-groomed. I sometimes see interpreters scratching their head, organizing their hair. For ladies and men, the same. It's not appropriate. You're not supposed to do that. You have to you're there to provide your services. And so your dress should be professional, and you have to be mindful of the temperature, weather conditions. We 100% rely on our brain, and the brain operates with the whole body. The whole body has to be ready for the session. And if you dress up too warmly in a warm setting, you will be sweating. Your brain will not function as efficiently. The same is true when the setting is too cold and you didn't dress up warm enough. So you have to make sure that you are prepared. Nobody is going to ask you to do that preparation. You have to be mindful. And be punctual. I'll always arrive about 15 minutes before the interpretation session. Maybe you can arrive 13 minutes, but let the other parties know 15 minutes before that you are there. So 15 minutes, climatize yourself. Not only temperature-wise, but mentally, you have to climatize yourself. Introduce yourself to the parties involved, and it is always a good idea to have a business card with you. Our names can be different from the usual names that people are used to hearing. My name is Bekircan Tahberer. It is unique. I'm the only one in the world with this name and last name. For many, many years, Bekircan, I was the only Bekircan in my country. But all the same, it doesn't mean anything to people who are not familiar with these names. So I always present my business card and slowly emphasizing my name. Hello, it's the interpreter in Turkish, Bekircan Tahberer. Here's my business card. It's Bekircan Tahberer. And you know what? They appreciate that. And they try to make an effort to pronounce my name properly, which is a good way of starting a conversation, becoming familiar with the other party. So having a business card, I print my own business cards. I do not use thousands of them. I don't bother to go to a print house to get 2,000 of them printed. I get blank ones from Staples and print my own business card. So it's not costly. Inform the administrator if there is any issue of conflict of interest, if this can't be done in advance. Sometimes they book us for a client without giving us the name of the client, and you go there and you notice that you know the client. Just if there is any conflict of interest issue, let them know. If you're interpreting for a person, stand or sit next to him or her and interpret in a whisper so as not to disturb the proceedings. This is when you are providing interpretation simultaneously. Again, in most community interpreting settings, you don't need to worry about that. But positioning yourself in a way that you provide services for the client is important. Just like me sitting in the middle in the helicopter, you are going to position yourself right next to the person that you're interpreting, facing the other party, because it is the conversation between the client and the administrator, between the client and the judge, between the client and the other party, whoever they may be. And you're the voice of each person, but mostly you're the voice of the client. That's why you sit next to the client, facing the other party that questions or converses with the client. Always face the administrator while interpreting for a person and interpret everything that a client says. Remember that only interpreters' words go on record. It is becoming standard practice to record simple proceedings now. So you have to get used to that idea. More guidelines: interpret only what is spoken in words. Allow the administrator to clarify gestures, etc. In certain cultures, this is very common. People sometimes give some gestures. You might know what they mean, but you're not there to interpret. Gestures have to be explained by the client. The other party, the administrator, should ask, what do you mean by that? Are you upset? Just interpret what is being spoken. Be accurate in your interpretation. Take time to fully comprehend what is being said and interpret it faithfully in the target language. Accuracy is more important than speed, though a good interpreter tries to keep up with the speech. New drivers tend to drive fast. New interpreters tend to speak fast. Don't do that. Driving fast can be deadly. Speaking fast during an interpretation can be disastrous. Try to keep up with the speech pattern, yet don't rush. Make sure you are not there to show off your language skills. Your language skills are required to understand what the client says, and the client should be able to understand what the other party says. So don't try to speak fast, but be accurate and provide complete interpretation. Always interpret in the first person. Speak clearly and in a voice that is audible to everyone and is recordable. So you are not there. I'm not there as Bekircan Tahberer. I am there as the voice of the client and or the other party. So it's always I. This person says, I didn't murder that person. I didn't murder that person. It is never, he said he didn't murder that person. It's very, very unprofessional. And also you have to speak clearly and in a voice really audible. You don't have to shout, of course, but loud enough for everyone to hear. After all, if they don't hear you well, they will ask you repeat it, and it can cause complications. You have to make sure that your voice is audible. Do not elaborate upon or explain a question to the parties involved. That is the administrator's task. Sometimes lawyers ask questions that are unintelligible. I just interpret whatever unintelligible statement they make and let the client say, I don't understand what you're saying. And the same is true when the client says something. People don't always speak clearly or grammatically. You're not there to correct anyone's grammar. You're not there to beautify their speech. You're there to interpret. They make mistakes, let the other party see the mistake and understand so that they have an idea, an opinion about the other person's speech pattern. To be accurate, you should take notes of names, addresses, dates, and numbers unless you are asked not to. Sometimes addresses are difficult or dates are difficult. I make a mental note on the numbers if I'm unable to take notes. And so far, I feel that I can still remember those dates and numbers. But if I'm at home in front of my computer, as I showed you, I always take notes. And at the end of the session, you may be asked to hand over the notes to the administrator. This is really crucial. This is something that you need to pay attention to. They, in court situations, they know about that. They might ask you. If they don't, you have to hand over your notes to the court clerk and make sure that they see, all parties see that you did not take any notes along when you leave the courtroom or any other setting. Do not translate proper names, spell out unusual names. Addresses, we don't translate. Proper names, we don't translate. The man's last name can be a beautiful mountain, you don't translate it. It's beautiful mountain in that language. And if it is an unusual name, just spell it out. Ask for clarification or repetition whenever you are in doubt. Say you didn't understand completely. You hand up, the interpreter didn't understand the question. It's not I didn't understand. I is the client. It's you didn't understand, so you speak in third person. The interpreter didn't understand. Do not ignore an unknown term, nor give it a doubtful phrase. There was an unknown term during a court session, for instance, and I was not in a position to go to my dictionary. The interpreter is not familiar with the word such and such. And the judge, in my case, gave me an explanation, and I interpreted that. So do not ignore it. Do not make up or paraphrase it. Just let the other parties know, guess what? Everyone is impressed. Everyone appreciates your honesty. Everyone appreciates your professionalism because you didn't make up. Did I look unprofessional? No, not really. I don't have to know every word. There are literally hundreds of thousands of words that I will never be able to remember. I will never be able to use in my life. But in a setting like that, they uttered it. So it's only normal that I don't know it, but it's also normal that I ask for explanation and clarification. So direct all questions to the parties in the third person. The interpreter requests. If a word is unfamiliar to you, request permission from the parties to have it clarified, as we said. If you made an error, inform the administrator so that the records may be corrected. Sometimes we think we understood it right, and we interpret it that way. But along the way, when the conversation deepens, we might discover that we made a mistake. Just let the parties know about that and get it corrected. It's, again, not unprofessional to misunderstand, but it is unprofessional not to correct it. So we have to be careful about that. If anyone questions your interpretation, do not get into an argument with that person. Stand by your interpretation if you know it to be correct. Acknowledge a mistake if you made one. Let the court administrator handle the situation should disagreement or challenges persist. There was a situation where I was asked to interpret the same statement 3 times. I didn't change it. The client didn't like it, and he challenged my interpretation. I interpreted his challenge. The third party said it again, and I interpreted it in the same way for the 3rd time. Finally, the lawyer said, I got the idea. Thank you very much. He was trying to mislead the lawyer. That was, I cannot find any other explanation for his behavior. He didn't speak English at all, and he didn't like the way I translated this statement. Anyways, if you believe that your interpretation is correct, do not get into any discussion with them. Just continue interpreting the way you interpret. Give interpretation in the same level of language register we said used in the original. So somebody is in a sad mood, you will not be interpreting with a smile, of course. And the same is true in an opposite situation. But you're not supposed to be laughing together with the client or crying together with the client. You have to be mindful of the register when you provide your services. Render faithfully all slang, vulgar expressions, expletives, and foul language. Some colleagues, whether culturally or religiously, feel uncomfortable about these. If you're in a situation like that, you have all the right not to interpret or utter those words, but you have to excuse yourself from that session. All the same, we have to understand and teach ourselves that these are not the words that we are saying. We are the voice of the client. It is their words, it's their phrases that we are translating or interpreting. And I see, no problem with interpreting slang, vulgar expressions, expletives, and foul language myself. However, I respect my colleagues when they don't want to interpret. The option is that you simply raise your hand, the interpreter hears some vulgar expressions, and religiously and culturally, the interpreter is unable to continue. And the interpreter asks to be excused. And you can leave. Nobody's going to blame you for that. Of course, the setting is broken. They have to find a new interpreter. Yet, again, you need to be mindful of what you might come across during during providing your services. Be neutral and impartial in your interpretation. Your opinions and emotions must not intrude. There are situations that exactly what's going on, and there is misleading statements. I feel bad, and that's why I like to go out and take a walk in open air, so that I discharge the stress accumulated in my mind. But in that setting, I have to be neutral and impartial, and my opinions and emotions have no place to intrude. And again, sometimes the sessions are prolonged. If fatigue or other indispositions affect your interpreting ability, inform the administrator and request a recess. Sometimes people want to finalize a court session or an interrogation session, and they go on and on and on. Well, we are all human. We have limitations, and if you feel uncomfortable, let the other parties know and take a break. Some general guidelines. You're an interpreter, not a lawyer. Do not give legal advice. This is an area that we have the most problems. Many clients interpreting for them think that you know the answer to certain questions, which is not true. Even if I know the answer to their questions, it's not my role to provide answers to those questions. So always refrain from giving legal advice. Ask them to contact their lawyer or administrator, ask their questions directly to them. Maintaining neutrality. Do not act as a referral service for a lawyer. Clients more often now than before ask me for a lawyer's name that can help them. I always tell them it's not my role to do that. Go online. I give them some leads to finding lawyers. I tell them to go online and Google search using certain keywords, and that's how they should find their lawyer. Maintain a professionally detached relationship with the person for whom you are interpreting. Never accept gratuities. During a recess, they usually approach you and they want to talk to you. Try not to get into any conversation with them, and ask to leave, or excuse yourself and go and sit somewhere else. And sometimes they offer to take you to lunch or to dinner. It's a never, no. Don't ever get engaged in such activities with clients. Do not discuss any case before anyone in which you are an interpreter, as we mentioned before. Maintaining the confidentiality of the official client relationship, keeping confidential all matters heard while interpreting. These are all standard principles. Evaluate judiciously at all times your ability to deliver a professional and accurate interpretation. You remember I said I still feel that my memory is competent enough to remember a lot of numbers and addresses and names. So you have to frequently test yourself and make sure no one else will know about your capabilities. You have to be aware of that and test yourself all the time. If you're faced with specialized terminology, dialectical forms, or regionalisms, which may impair your comprehension of the conversation, you may need to offer to withdraw from interpreting. And it's not a bad thing. It's not unprofessional to withdraw from an assignment. Interpreters are self-confident, outgoing, sociable, culturally sensitive, and reliable language professionals. You have to see all of these qualities in yourself. So make sure that you are, and you have to present yourself as a confident person, outgoing, sociable. So you should speak up. I don't say yell or scream, but speak loud and show that you are there as a professional, and presenting yourself is important. And having little conversation, professional conversation at the beginning is very important when you are presenting yourself. Red flag and green flag. I love this cartoon, and it says everyone carries invisible flags. One is red, one is green. When you do a good job, people invisibly raise the green flag. When you don't do a good job invisibly, people put up the red flag. Make sure that you get the green flag, the invisible green flag at all times. You will never know if you will get green flag or not, but you can be sure you will get a green flag when you follow all the guidelines that I mentioned and do your job in the most proper and efficient way. You will get the green one. Some reference materials for you. Language Portal of Canada is my favorite website when it comes to languages. There are literally thousands of pages behind this unassuming homepage. It's one of my favorite bookmarks. Whenever I have 5-10 minutes, I go there, and without fail, I always learn something new. So I would definitely recommend that you spend some time here. There are some translation interpretation portals that you can create a free account just to have online presence. These are 3 of them, but there are more of them. Critical Link is an interesting institution. They have some valuable resources for community interpreters. Again, it's a good website to spend some time to learn about their resources. Supreme Court has a good website for self-help information in the court system. Also, clicklaw.bc.ca is an interesting website to visit. And then you have resources in 15 languages in Clicklaw. I'd like to spend some time. Mosaic is a nonprofit organization that hires translators and interpreters. You might want to contact them to provide interpretation services. They will prefer to work with certified interpreters and translations, but in rare languages or in remote areas where they don't have translators and interpreters, they might want to work with you. The same is true for Provincial Language Service. They provide translation and interpretation services. It's another nonprofit institution. Their rates are very low though, but you need to talk to them and see if you can work with them. This is a tremendous website for medical interpreters. The information that they've put together here is incredible. If you are interested in medical interpretation, this is a great resource. And if you have further questions, I am always at your service. You can always contact me and ask your questions, and I will do my best to answer your questions to the best of my ability. Thank you for attending the workshop again, and any questions, I am ready. Okay. Oh, satisfaction survey. I'm not allowed to use this one though, I guess.
Thank you for the excellent workshop, Bekircan. That was lovely and interesting. And this is my second time attending this workshop, and it's just as informative and helpful as it was the first time around.
Thank you.
I have put the satisfaction survey in the chat. If you do not mind responding to it, that would be very helpful. It is the same satisfaction survey that I submitted for the workshop that we had on Tuesday. So if you've already completed it, please do not feel like you have to complete it again.
So I have a question. Can I ask?
Sure, go ahead.
You explained about privileged information. I just didn't understand it completely. I lost actually your explanation for a while. So I didn't understand what you mean by privileged information. Would you please just explain it briefly again?
Sure. Now, in certain situations, people feel that, let's put it this way, forget about that. Let's say I have this presentation and I'm going to share this presentation with everyone because as an instructor, I feel that the information, my information is your information because you attended it and I want to share it with you. Even though it is my privileged information, I agree to share it with you. Yet, you don't have the privilege to share it with another party because it's my privileged intellectual property. I agree to share it with Fora Shohtariyazadeh. I do not agree, Ms. Shohtariyazadeh, to share it with another party because it is a privilege that I granted to her and she is more than welcome to use it. But again, yet it is still privileged information.
Yes,
So
I-
our client's information is for our ears only. It is both confidential, but more than confidential, it is privileged. Confidential, yeah, of course, it is going to be kept there. But at the same time, it was made public for that occasion, in that occasion, and it must not go out of that setting. Does that explain?
Yeah, thank you so much. And if it's possible, I have another question. You told that if you, for example, there's something like that, swears, bad words, that the interpreter somehow doesn't like to interpret them. And you told that in this case, that should lead or withdraw, okay? But imagine that you are in the middle of a court and you are in the middle of interpreting the case. So, and there are some bad words, and so you cannot, you don't like for any reason to interpret them. How you can say, okay, I'm going, I can't, interpreter can't interpret these things, so I'm interpreter say goodbye and leave the court.
You don't really say goodbye at all. You explain your position. Again, you raise your hand. The interpreter hears some vulgar language, and religiously and culturally, the interpreter feels unable to utter those words. I can continue providing my services after this part of the session. But if the parties feel that my service is inadequate, I am ready to withdraw. So you explain your situation, but of course, you're not being bossy. You're not being upset. You're not allowed to get upset in a situation like that. You're a professional, right? You might feel uneasy, uncomfortable, and you show your feelings by simply saying that the interpreter hears some vulgar language, and culturally and religiously, the interpreter feels that she's not able to provide interpretation services under the conditions. The interpreter is ready to withdraw if that is what you decide to do. So again, we have to make sure that everyone, we're not there to upset anyone. That's the main thing, okay? We are asked to provide a professional service, and we need to position ourselves professionally under any condition.
Okay, this last question. Actually, my field is language and linguistics, and I have been working with English language for many years.
I cannot really hear you very well.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
How is it now?
It's better. Yes, please.
My field has been language and linguistics, and I have been teaching English and working on English and Persian for many years. And so I'm interested in giving that exam for interpreters or translators. But what is the first step? How we should apply for that, where we can give that exam, how we should get prepared for that. I will be grateful if, in case you be able to give me any guidance, or if I can give you my email address, or you give your email address to me, I email to you.
You don't need to worry about any of these, because we're going to have a session for that. We have another session for entitled The Path to Accreditation and Certification in Canada. So we're going to talk about it extensively. And maybe the best thing for you will be to contact the Society of Translators and Interpreters, but I'm going to talk about it in detail in the next session, and you should get enough information about that.
Thank you so much. And
You're welcome.
how can we access the record of your classes? Because unfortunately, I lost the previous session. I don't know, was it you there or?
I'm sure it is still available. I'm sure my colleague will be able to provide with the link to the presentation and the video. You can watch that as well.
Absolutely. Please send me an email. I put it in the chat at the beginning of the session. If you send me an email, I will provide you with the recording from the session and yesterday or last week's session if you would so like.
Sorry, can I have just your name or an
Yes,
email address?
it's in the group chat, but it is rtt@kcr.ca.
Yeah. So rtt@kcr.ca. Thank you so much.
That's right, of course, no
Thank
problem.
you so much, Mr. Berdan.
You're welcome. You're welcome. No problem. Yes.
It was nice to acquaint with you and listen to you.
Mhm, mhm.
That's
Thank
it.
you. And thank you, Anastasia, for your kind words. I am happy that you enjoyed and found the presentation informative. It's a privilege for me to share this information with everyone who are interested in interpreting and translating.
And it's a privilege to have you share this information with all of us.
Thank you. Thank you. Ziba, I think you have some questions. Go ahead. Don't be shy.
No, I liked the information, and because I worked as a translator, but I didn't have any accreditation. So when I worked in Uzbekistan with the Doctors Without Borders, and I was a good counselor. And because I was a good counselor, anytime when they wanted someone to talk to, they would ask me to translate because I would speak English. And I remember those things you pointed out, that like being like noticing how other translators sometimes put their judgment, like in that movie Desert Flower, and I remember feeling frustrated about that, and how like I think during the work I learned how it's important to give the message and to put away your own opinion. And yeah, so it's very important. I know that. Yeah, here
Yeah.
I did the translation for an elderly woman who spoke Russian. I speak Russian too, and I remember same like feeling frustrated, but at the same time saying to myself, no, that's not my job. My
Of
job is
course.
to translate.
Of course.
And
Of course.
I know about because it was the counseling visits, and I know about the overwhelmness feeling afterwards. So it's important to take care of itself too. Yeah, it's important to.
Well, I was interpreting for a client with a lawyer last week. Every word he uttered was a lie. You know, it's always the guy is lying from beginning to end.
Yeah.
And you know, it hurts my heart, as they say. You know, of course, it's the brain that hurts. It hurts my brain. And again, it was raining when I left the lawyer's office. I had an umbrella. I didn't even open up my umbrella. I just wanted to have the rain hit my head and you know, get wet. At the cost of catching cold, I wanted to release the tension. And guess what? The lawyer wants to believe that the lawyer's job is, of course, they're going to. It's work for them, right? And this person went through such hardship, horror, and difficulties. I have a 5-year-old cell phone. This person came here and purchased a new iPhone 14 plus, whatever it is, and wearing $200 shoes when I wear $60 shoes. You know, I'm not envious or anything, or I'm not really saying he doesn't deserve any of those. But this person is getting legal aid, and I am underpaid at legal aid fees, and the lawyer is getting the bulk of the payment, and this person is 100% lying. Can you get any more stressful than that?
Yeah.
But it's my job, right? I'm there to interpret. I simply put aside my emotions, even though I'm human and the emotions build up. No matter what, you get angry. Every word he says is a lie. Yet, you do your job and then go walk in the rain.
Yeah, so thank you for sharing that, because it is important to take care of ourselves. Yeah.
Oh, yes, yes, yeah. You know, we, and if you remember, I said we work for ourselves, right? We work with lawyers, we work with people, but in the end, we work for ourselves. We're not the employee of anyone. That's why we have to take good care of ourselves. After all, the only treasure that we have is here. We need to keep this healthy. Okay, well, you see, I'm using you as a counselor, and I'm emptying my stress. At every chance I find people to talk to, people that I feel that will sympathize with me, I speak up. Thank you, Ziba. I appreciate your patience and listening to me.
Well, thank you for the session.
You're welcome. Chen Yun, you have nothing else to say to me? You don't want to talk to me? Maybe I have things to tell you too. Just show us yourself and let's talk. No, okay, no, maybe you're not available. That's fine. Okay, if there is no other question, I will say goodbye and give you my best wishes for a wonderful weekend. It's the Chinese New Year, the year of the rabbit. May rabbit bring you good luck and prosperity, and many assignments, many translation and interpretation assignments.
Thank you.
Have a wonderful afternoon.
You too.
Thank you, you too.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.